Hello my friends, welcome to my channel, Lindy's Magpie Reads. I'm Lindy. I do read a lot and that's mostly what I talk about here. I finished 5 books recently, and before I get into that, I just want to mention Facebook reminds us what happened a year ago, and in Edmonton it was minus 35 Celsius. With the wind chill, it felt like minus 45. Now I'm living in Victoria. The weather outside is 7 degrees Celsius. That's like 44 Fahrenheit, I think. I'm so grateful to be here. So this morning, when I read today's short story from my short story Advent calendar, it is a Anton Chekhov story called The Boys, translated by Constance Garnett, a very well-known translator of 19th century Russian literature. And the fact that it's a translation reminded me that I had a lot more to say about a webcast that I watched about a week ago, School Library Journals Found in Translation. I mentioned it last week, I think. Anyway, one of the questions that came from the audience was, is it fair for a reviewer to talk about the quality of a translation when they haven't read the original work? And I loved hearing the responses from the translators and editors in this panel. And they said, of course it's all right. What you're talking about when you're reviewing is the quality of the language, what's in front of you. And it's understood that the reviewer is not going to have read the original. And a translation is not a word for word kind of a work. It is a recreation of the feel of the original. And editors work with translators to get that effect as much as possible. So when you're praising the translation, you're praising that they've done a great job of using evocative language, and that the story comes through clearly, and that it's a great book. And actually, one of the editors pointed out that we never see in reviews where someone will comment that the editor working with an English language writer contributed a lot to the work. We don't see that. So what we do is judge what we've got in front of us. So whether it's a translation or a work that originally appeared in English, and maybe the editor that worked with that writer had a lot to do with it, we don't know. It's what we've got in front of us. So in case any of you have been wondering about that, this is what these translators and editors had to say. Now, there was an article in, I think, Extra Magazine, and it might have come up in other news sources as well, about shadow banning and an Ontario school board. And I talked about this, I don't know, maybe a month ago. I'll link my original video below. Danny Ramadan was one of the authors whose books had been moved to a teacher-only shelf. And it was part of a collection of books that is being promoted across Ontario for school children of all ages. I mean, there's different age categories for each. So anyway, I picked up another one of those books that had been banned specifically because of its queer content. And like Danny Ramadan's book, this one is an early chapter book, so it's for beginning readers, and it's number 3 in the series. The Nguyen Kids series. It's about this Vietnamese family. So this book is called The Mystery of the Painted Fan, and it's by Trinh, and it has lots of illustrations by Clayton Nguyen. It's so cute. The story focuses on Jacob, who is the youngest member of the Nguyen family. And through the course of the story, Jacob is exploring a non-binary identity, and by the end wants to be called Jay. I don't know about pronouns, so I'll just use they for Jacob, who loves playing hockey, needs a new helmet, and wants it to be pink. Pink is the color that they like, even though their father tries to discourage them. And also Jacob does get teased about it and is not happy about that. Still, their family is supportive, and also supportive of wearing nail polish and other kinds of things that some kids are telling him that's a girl's thing, that's not for you. And it is a warm and reassuring story. He has an older cousin who is working on a GSA poster, a Gay Straight Alliance poster, and talks to Jacob about non-binary identities. I think that's a great way of including that in this book. Anyway, I will recommend it for kids who are about age 8 to 11 or so. That one is a Canadian title, and the next 4 books are all by American authors. I'm going to start with this children's picture book, A Walk in the Woods. It is a collaboration between 3 creators. It started out with a poet, Nikki and the many times award-winning picture book illustrator, Jerry Pinkney. They started working on this in 2019, and Jerry Pinkney died in 2021. All of the text had been completed, and tight sketches were also ready, but Pinkney hadn't done the colors yet. And so his son, Brian Pinkney, who is also an artist and illustrator, agreed to finish the work. And it is so beautiful, and also kind of ironic that it's Pinkney's son who finished it, because the story itself is about a boy whose father has just died, and his mother gives him an envelope that his father left for him, and in it there's a key and a map to a treasure which is off in the woods. And so we follow him through the woods, finds the box and unlocks it, and inside is a sheaf of drawings that he realizes his father drew when he was the boy's age. And the final page is blank, and there's a note there: I leave you these drawings, these scribbles, and mostly this forest, the true treasure. Finish my stories or not, but this last page is for you, son. Draw and write your own story. I will always be watching. And yes, the comfort of going out into nature is captured, and the swirling sort of abstract watercolors that Brian added to his father's sketches are just magical, absolutely magical. And in Brian's note at the end, he says that it was his niece, Charnel Pinkney Barlow, who helped him with her skill in using a digital collage. So Brian was able to layer his father's sketches with his own art. And I think, wow, what a talented family. Not too long ago, I talked about a picture book that Charnel Pinkney Barlow illustrated. It was called Everything in Its Place by Pauline David Sachs. I will link that video below in case you're interested and you missed it. And I've also been working my way through this great big fat Pictured Worlds by Leonard Marcus, and it is about 101 children's picture book illustrators from around the world. There is a section on Jerry Pinkney. In this case, it's the book John Henry that Leonard Marcus is talking about. I love that he shows the difference between thumbnail sketches and tight sketches that are ready to be colored, in case you were wondering about that. Next up is another children's book. I listened to this one in audio. It's called Eagle Drums. It's by an Inupiaq artist, Nasugraq Rainey Hopson. She grew up on the most northern part of Alaska. As I mentioned, she's of the indigenous peoples there, the Inupiaq. The audiobook is read by Irene Bedard, who is also Inupiaq, by the way. It is a retelling of an oral tale of the messenger feast that is an Inupiaq tradition. And because this time of year is a time of gift giving, I thought I would read you just a little part from Eagle Drums. Oh, and before I read this, the main message in this book is to overcome a fear of strangers. The boy in the book, who is a skilled hunter even at a young age, has it ingrained in him that there's stranger danger. He and his family never interact with strangers. So this is a lesson in the book that he gets from the eagle gods. A golden eagle appears to him and takes him off to where these shape-shifting eagles live, learns these lessons, and this conversation is with the mother of the eagles. You will get rid of your fear of strangers. She eyed the boy. Do you understand my instructions? The boy hid his doubts. He bowed his head and nodded his understanding. I also want you to create gifts for your guests so they do not go home empty-handed. The world is a balance of energies. If you give without the expectation of receiving anything in return, this generosity will come back to you in the future. And if you are picking up the print version of this, then you will see there's a lot of illustrations that Hopson has included in it. I believe she also did the cover image. I think I mentioned that this is a children's book, but really it's in all ages, as many traditional stories are. Yeah, very well done. Next, I want to talk about the gay novel that won the National Book Award this year. That's Blackouts by Justin Torres. I mentioned last week that I had been finding it slow going at first. It is a bit of a puzzle of a book, and I was confused. There are 3 different people in this book with the surname Gay. There's a Juan, there's a Yan or Jan, and then there's a Xenia. Well, by the time I was a third of the way through, I was hooked. And this is why patience pays off. I loved this book. Oh, it's a deathbed conversation between two gay men. One is quite elderly and the other one is a young man, 27 years old. The two first met about a decade earlier when the young guy was only 17 and they were both in a mental hospital. The young guy, in the interim, seems to have mostly gotten by through sex work, and his connection with the older guy is really heartwarming. He's watching someone who's really important to him, like almost family, die. And on the part of Juan, the guy who's dying, he is imparting important information about gay history in general, as well as personal history, and you find out why these three surnames, these people, and how they're connected. And he wants the younger fellow, who he calls Nene, to continue a project that he's been working on. Now, there are real people referred to in this novel, including the woman who this project that Juan's working on. Her name is Jan Gay, or her pseudonym anyway. Her real name was Helen Reitman. But she has connections, or had connections, to Andy Warhol and Emma Goldman, and so there's people like that that are a little bit in it. But the other really intriguing aspect of the book, and if you've heard about it all, you probably know this, that there is a lot of imagery, a lot of illustrations, pages from an actual book called Sexual Variants, with lots of blackouts. And what Torres has done is black out the medical pathology of being queer, and reclaiming the joy, telling history from a proud gay point of view. And I don't know, maybe it's because I'm in my 60s. I came out in 1979, and this history that's being talked about in the novel, this is back to the 30s and 40s, but still, it's important to me, and I was so glad to be reading it and reading about someone sharing, recovering a hidden past, a blacked out past. There was one part in it that I had heard about before, and that is a couple of sculptures that were made, I think in the 1930s or the 1940s, part of the eugenics idea that there is an ideal man and an ideal woman. The sculptures were called Norman and Norma. But the book that I heard about them in, it was called Butts, A Backstory by Heather Radke. I recommend that book, by the way. And in the chapter where Heather Radke talks about why it is that ready-to-wear clothing rarely fits anybody, and the measurements that were used to come up with small, medium, and large were also measurements that were used to create these statues. Another one of the images in this book is an actual illustration that the artist Xenia Gay created, and there is a blinkered endnotes at the end of the book, and this is what it says about illustration of baby goat. One of my favorites of Xenia's images, and perhaps another archetype. the soft little boy prancing around in his mother's heels, from her book, Jingle Jangle. I know this book is not going to be for everyone, but if what I've said so far intrigues you, I encourage you to pick it up and give it a try. And if you have read it, please let me know what you think down in the comments below. Now, the last book that I'm going to tell you about, so my favorite of the 5, is a graphic memoir by the political cartoonist Darrin Bell. It's called The Talk. I had to return it to the library. Other people were waiting. So I took some images before I returned it so you can see Bell's style and how fat this book is. It's 350 pages. And I heard Bell talking about this book when he said that it was originally over 650 pages and his editor made him cut it. However, he is going to use those pages in another book, and I think that one's going to be great too. So Bell has a white mother and a black father. His coming of age is heartbreaking in the fact that from a young age he has got to face racism, bigotry, and his mother had to have the talk with him, the talk about how he would not be treated in the same way as little white boys because of his color. He had to be careful around police, figures of authority, and sadly, throughout his schooling and even into university, he encountered a lot of prejudice from his teachers and other people around him. He documents those. This story also has a lot of hope and humor. He has examples of his political cartoons in it, and I particularly loved his cartoons about gay marriage. That ties in quite well with Justin Torres's book that I was just telling you about. I actually remember seeing these. I had no idea about the cartoonist at that time, but Darrin Bell was the first African American to win a Pulitzer Prize for political cartooning, and that was in 2019. Having that kind of talk with a child is obviously difficult, forever taking away their innocence. And Bell was disappointed in his father for not talking to him about things. It was his mother who mostly talked about things with him, and his grandfather. But when he has a young son of his own and he has to face it, you know, you see his disappointment that the world hasn't changed and this talk is still necessary. This is the kind of book you want to give to white people so that we can understand why that talk is necessary, and we can be a part of working towards eliminating the necessity in the future. Darrin Bell's work emphasizes human dignity, and I cannot recommend it highly enough. So that is all I've got for you today. Thank you very much for watching. I so appreciate you following me, sticking with me, subscribing. So thank you very much. I wish you all well, and I hope there are special treats in store for you at this time of the year in particular. And so for my outro, I am going to include a little clip about marzipan, a marzipan display that I saw in a local store. Hope you enjoy. Wishing sweet things to all of you. Bye for now.